Amy, thank you so much for joining us tonight at the Regent, virtually, of course. And I'm really excited to dig into your new film, It's Never Over, Jeff Buckley, with you, especially in contrast to all the work that you've done in the past. You've covered a lot of different topics: religion, scandal, true crime, music, including Janice Little Girl Blue, which had the Boston premiere here at the Regent. When you're working on music stories, do you have a different mindset or approach, or is it kind of all the same to you? Do you wear a different hat, so to speak?
Mm. Well, I'm always, as a storyteller, I'm always looking for the emotion in a story. And for me, it's kind of, I am a real music junkie, and I actually started my career in the music business. So I'm always kind of thinking about the story through a musical connection. So I love the idea and the actuality of like great score and great composition and a great song in a scene. So it's all kind of one for me, but especially with Jeff, there's so much emotion in his music. So it's kind of a blend of the narrative and the how his life connected to the music that he wrote.
Are there things that you learned from working on the Janis Joplin documentary? Perhaps there can be a learning curve with these things sometimes that you pulled into this when it comes to telling a musician's story specifically?
Yeah, I believe that every film teaches you a certain amount of lessons. And Janice, that was a film set in the 70s, the 60s, actually. And there was a lot to learn in terms of licensing and the cost of music and trying to find everything you need and how to tell a story with somebody who's no longer here. So I think I did learn a lot from Janice, and she was a great teacher. For this particular project, because there was a lot of similarity, not just Sony being the label, Columbia for Jeff, but there was a lot of mixed medium in both of these stories, and I was able to incorporate different things to tell them.
When you say that, excuse me, Janice was a great teacher, do you mean the film process, or that you picked up things from her, obviously posthumously, but that informed your process? And if that's the case, did you learn anything from Jeff?
Well, I learned from Janice, the person, posthumously, that she needed to be cared for in a certain way while I was making the film, because she wasn't there to answer any questions. Either was Jeff. So I just learned to really like key in and listen, um, and try to find a way to bring both of their voices to life, um, in a way that's respectful and feels authentic. So I definitely like would hone in on things and then check in with the people closest to them to make sure that I was getting it right. Um, and with Jeff, there's so much in his mannerisms, that that you can really pick up on the filmed footage of him. So I just like, I wanted to like double check those things and make sure that I was not like overusing mannerisms, let's say. So I had a great jury, I should say, or a great group of people that I could, check things over with.
You've made a point of checking and making sure that you're doing his story justice, which makes me think about, were there any pitfalls from other music documentaries that you've seen, or pet peeves from how other musicians' stories are told that you wanted to make sure to avoid? Because especially when someone's no longer with us and they died sooner than they should have, it can be easy for the story to go in a direction that feels more exploitative. And that didn't happen here, but thinking about other documentaries that you've seen, was there anything that you made sure that you wanted to avoid?
Well, I wanted Jeff to speak for himself, and there was enough material to substantiate that. I mean, Jeff taught me a lot. I got this archive completely in 2019. And I was kind of, on the heels of the Women's March, I was learning a lot about feminism myself in those few years post Trump being elected and all the protests that were going on. And I was learning a lot from his words and his language. And so I wanted to just I would never want to sensationalize any subject in any film that I make. But everyone tells stories in their own style. And I just like to be the fly on the wall as much as possible and let the character speak for themselves. So I tried to do that. And I didn't want, because every person that Jeff knew had a different version of Jeff than he did. So I wanted to try to find the Jeff version of it because, we're all different with different people. That's just part of being a human.
You have made a comment that he was really consistent in his interviews, and I thought that was interesting. When you say that, consistent, how in that he didn't contradict himself much, that his tone was very similar with the different people that he talked to, and what does that consistency mean for you as a filmmaker? How does that affect your job?
Well, it wasn't his tone, it was his language and his words. I think he spent so much time thinking about his thesis and who he was as a person that he really rang true. Even if he was really tired or had been on the road for quite some time, I didn't find a lot of inconsistencies in his story. So that made it easy because, there's people that live longer probably change their tune about things. I mean, I've noticed that on other projects where, somebody said one thing in their 20s and then in their 50s, it was like the exact opposite. So for me, it was easier to find that truth within the window of time that he was speaking publicly and privately.
Well, I would think it would be maybe a little bit of a blessing because musicians can be quite mercurial in interviews, and to balance the calm, mindful interviews with the press with perhaps when they were not feeling their best. So I did notice that as well. It was as if he was very consistently calm when he was speaking. And I think one of the biggest or most moving pieces of the documentary for me was when he made a comment about, when people think about me, I don't want them to think about my name or my face or my body. I just want them to think about the music, because when I'm dead, that's all that's going to be left anyways. And I thought that was really telling about how he felt about becoming famous. And, a lot of people would have the opposite. They want you to think about how they present visually. What does that mean for you as someone who's putting together a piece of visual media?
I just think it's so sad, to be honest with you, because I mean, he wasn't desperate for success, obviously, but he wanted to be the best at what he did. And I think it's so sad that there's so much love and support for Jeff Buckley right now. And he felt so great about his fans appreciating him. And I just think it would be so amazing if he could see what was happening right now. Yeah, I mean, I know that your question is more about um, how did I formulate that in the film? And I obviously there's so much music in the film, and I, emphasize how much he wants to be remembered for that. But I don't know. Sometimes I guess it's because the film is out now, and that question has made me feel bad for him for not being able to experience this.
Yeah. Well, I
'Cause he
think
was so tired when Grace came out, he was working so hard. He was so burnt out all the time that I just wish that there was a way that he could have seen the true joy almost 30 years later. It's crazy,
does that feel like a responsibility of yours to help people better understand that impact, because he can't see it for himself now?
Um, I don't think I have to. It's like the kids are going crazy for this. Like this is like there's kind of all you have to do is mention his name, and so it goes viral. So I don't. It's everyone's music, and everyone has their own personal relationship with Jeff through his music and whatever else it is about him that attracts them to him. So, I don't feel any responsibility except to own what I've done as a filmmaker and a storyteller, and that was to tell this story through these voices about this version of Jeff.
Now, as someone who is a fan of his, did you find that that was an asset or I shouldn't say and something that perhaps made the process take a little bit longer? Because I've never made a film, but I have written podcast scripts. And I know that if you're a fan of someone, it can actually make it harder because it's almost like you know too much or you're being a little too careful, and you're really so invested. So how did your own relationship with his music impact the development and the timeline of the film?
Well, that's a great question. And I have to shout out to my producer, Christine Connor, for this because in the beginning, I was trying to keep it very intimate, and the people right around him have a certain viewpoint that doesn't really criticize much, in the conversations we had. And so in order to cast a little bit of a wider net there, I was introduced to Amy Mann, and I thought that really brought some perspective because when I would talk to, there were people I couldn't speak to that I wish I could have spoken to, like PJ Harvey and Elizabeth Fraser, who had experiences with Jeff as well. But when I spoke to Amy, it was so clear that, she had such high regard for him, but that he was a conflicted person. And, I think it's important to show those inconsistencies. Cause I heard from other people that were on the road with him that there wasn't too many a girl that would turn him down. But I did hear that Hope Sandoval from Mazzy Star was not interested as well. So who knows? But anyway, I wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of counterpoint. And also Ben Harper offered some really interesting perspective. I wouldn't say he was in his inner circle, but he had some really poignant experiences with Jeff. And I thought that kind of after having numerous conversations about the story, like the story that your audience just saw about the, Eurocan Festival, that kind of, if you look at that in hindsight, knowing how Jeff died, that's kind of, that's a very high impulsive act that he did in France. And I think it's really significant in terms of his trajectory of his life.
And talking about some of the different people you spoke to, his mother was an invaluable asset. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you approached her multiple times with her blessing. It was almost until she was ready. This took years. Mm-hmm. What do you think was the tipping point that she finally felt like she was comfortable or it was the right time?
Well, she says she always knew that I was the right person to tell the story, but she wasn't ready. So I'll just go with that's her words. So I would go with that story. I mean, you can probably read between the lines. There are a lot of things that go on into this kind of a decision to let her son's story be shared with the world. And that was a big decision for her and for everyone else that I spoke to. So it's a lot that goes into it, obviously.
When it comes to talking to someone who's lost their child and who lost their child on a really big platform, how do you go about making someone like that feel ready and feel comfortable so that you respect them and the story?
Really, it's just time and patience. There's no like formula to that. And I think I'm generally patient about these kinds of things. And I just wanted her to be ready. You can't force somebody into something.
Yeah. And the payoff is always grand when someone is ready.
Yeah. But it could have gone the other way. There was always a chance that somebody else could have made this film and I would have been so upset. But anyway, yes.
And to wrap it up, what would you say is the biggest new perspective or new part of Jeff that you wanted this film to add to the conversation about him, or perhaps it's more like there was a misconception about him or the way his life unfolded that you wanted to tackle?
I mean, the obvious misconception is his death, but for me, that's not the answer I want to provide right now, because for me, the bigger takeaway is Jeff lived his life to the fullest with love and creativity. And I would hope that this story will encourage people to follow their heart and chase the art that they want to make, because I think that's what Jeff would want.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us virtually tonight. Congratulations, and I'm glad it was you who got who
Thank
got
you.
the film. Thank you so much.
Thanks.